Well, with that, we'll just go to the next slide, and we're just going to run through. So firstly, Udev Kirika here, bringing Udev back to talk about this very interesting subject. We'll just run to the next slide, please. To catch up on some time here. So just for those who haven't attended these webinars before, this one's 45 minutes long. People have been asking to have them longer. We did the last one too short, which is good. So there's a lot of information discussed today. Viewers can submit questions. Those are anonymous. And we want lots of questions submitted today because we're getting into the meaty stuff around source of wealth, source of funds. We're going to run a poll, just break things up, and everybody can participate in that. That is also anonymous, so be honest and get those answers in. It's good insights for us, or for everybody. We'll share those results later. The webinar will be recorded, and there's a quick survey at the end. Those that want to get CPD points, if you go to do the survey at the end, which just will pop up on your screen, then please do so, because then you can request through that. And also that webinar, the pop-up survey has some really important questions. Reluctantly, I'll put a disclaimer up. These are insightful, informative. At the end of the day, as you know, as reporting entities, you need to comply and understand what your compliance is about. We're here to share information, make sure that you have good knowledge, and how you apply those to your own businesses and practices is for you to ultimately decide. You're ultimately responsible. So let's just jump to the next slide. I've got Monique offline here, who'll be helping with the webinar, so I don't have to be dashing around on clicking on buttons. Oh, apparently I do. Let me hit the space bar there. Okay, so I've pilfered a few slides from our last webinar, which was on CDD, and this is so we can segue nicely into what today's topic is about. So first you need to understand when source of wealth and source of funds needs to be done. Obviously it's part of enhanced CDD. In fact, fundamentally it is the difference between standard CDD and enhanced CDD, is you have to do source of wealth, source of funds. I think everybody understands that. Yeah,
that's basically what it is.
Okay, and this chart here just helps make it understood that in some cases you may even do it on a natural person, a company estate, and always on a trust. So if we just...
I mean, with the estate, it's like if the estate is a vehicle for holding personal funds, then it might come under Section 22.
Right.
Because it's area through.
Okay, cool. So we go to the next.
Depends on how it is sort of structured.
So as I said, this is some slides from the last one about CDD. Everybody would be comfortable and know this stuff, but let's look at when you must perform enhanced CDD, because again, if you don't need to do source of wealth, source of funds / ECDD, then don't do it. So understand when you have to do it. So these were listed last time. We won't go through these exhaustively. This is pretty much straight from the Act, or in fact these are from the Act.
Yeah, I put in one more. It's like it depends on the risk, your assessed risk of the situation.
Right.
And that is sort of a variable where it's up to the reporting entity. If the reporting entity thinks that the situation is risky, it's their assessment, then they have to do enhanced CDD because it is their risk assessment there. So that is a variable that they have to carefully sort of.
So again, it comes back to the risk assessment. You need to know your risk assessment, and you need to be applying it.
Just for example, like if you have assessed that there's a high risk from money laundering from dealing with China, for example, right? Then it's your assessment that says that it's a risky situation. Then you have to enhance CDD because you have said it's a risky situation. I say that depending on the risk of the situation, you have to enhance CDD.
And so, it doesn't necessarily mean it's really the nature and purpose of the business.
That's very important. Really crucial of
But in fact, isn't that the fundamental? What is the nature and purpose of the business in this transaction that's going to take place?
The purpose of the relationship and why have they come to you? What do they want to do with you? If you understand that really well, then you can monitor what they're doing on your business more effectively.
Okay.
And that will let you know if you have to report it or not report it, or help to justify your course of action.
Okay, so let's get into some more bigger questions. Can you click them? Oh, just put on the table. You've got a screen for it. There you go. Right, so steps to enhance CDD / source of wealth, source of funds. So this is really now the meaty bit. So it's interesting that the level of verification required is not mandated. So again, this is where people throw their hands in the air about the Act, and the Code of Practice doesn't cover this.
The Code of Practice is just for verifying the full name and date of birth of customers.
Right.
Nothing to do with enhanced CDD.
There is a document on enhanced customer due diligence,
Yeah.
which has a piece about, obviously talks about source of wealth, source of funds.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
it's not mandated how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Section 22 says when you have to do it.
Yeah.
Basically, when you have to do it is sort of almost set out in law. The only variable being the risk of the situation. Right? That is the little variable that you have to think
So again,
about.
this is where risk becomes so important.
Yeah, that's being a risk assessment. Then when you have to do enhanced CDD, you have to obtain and verify, and then depending on the risk of the situation, verify the source of the funds and the wealth. So because they've got.
So can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Verify, the legislation says you have to verify. You have to satisfy yourself.
Reasonable steps.
Reasonable steps. So that could be anything. Could that be? So my risk assessment says, in this scenario, we're happy with a phone call to the source's lawyer or something like that, as opposed to having to get hard documents signed and approved. Or
I mean, there's no case law at present on this topic. Right?
Right.
So that becomes like, anybody's guess, so to speak, now.
Yeah.
So, but it has to be an informed guess. I mean, the safe way to do it would be to document why you think it is reasonable. See, because that means you've done what you think is best for that situation.
okay.
Right? So you are not reckless. See, the offences under the Act are if you don't do CDD or if you don't, do all that stuff, right? That is your first, that's your Civil Liability Act. But if you don't do these things in a reckless manner, then it becomes an offence.
Which was exactly the words used in the case that was in the Herald today. Reckless behaviour.
Right. If they were reckless, then they can go for a criminal prosecution. But they have to reckless, they have mens rea and all those sort of things that the lawyers would probably know. You have to show the intent and all that type of stuff there. So if you have documented your steps and stuff, then you can definitely argue that, well, I thought this was best, right? And then I thought this was the best thing to do in that situation, and because of so and so reasons, and that's your reason there. So then nobody can say, you didn't do anything without thinking about it. Right? You've shown your thought process, you've shown your reason, you've shown why you think it is reasonable, and you thought it was reasonable.
Yeah.
So
and you've documented that.
And you documented
which is
that.
So from an audit perspective,
you documented it.
Yeah.
You documented it, and then like even for the supervisor, then the supervisor will have to show why they think it is not reasonable.
So just pausing here, taking reasonable steps to verify, that's completely subjective.
It is.
Yeah.
That's why it is. I mean, that's why technically compliance should not be difficult, because the Act gives you such a wide sort of berth to decide what you will do.
I think it's too wide, and that's where people are left wondering.
No, it is. I mean, you can take advantage of it being wide, right? So, I mean, that's probably you think that Parliament didn't want it to be prescriptive. If they wanted it to be prescriptive, they would have made it prescriptive and they'd have forced it to do that.
Right.
The fact that they haven't done it means they have, given that the reporting entities the power to decide. Because see, the whole thing is that the reporting entities have been stuck in because they know their customers best, they know the market best, they know what the problems could be best. DIA would not know that.
Right, exactly. They need evidence of why.
That's right. And somebody coming to work for DIA from immigration yesterday, and suddenly DIA, what would he know about your business that you do not know?
Right.
So that for you decide, and then you document why you think this was the best thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's like how you document it. The more detailed
okay. Sorry.
the better.
We just got someone saying it's very hard to hear. So actually, let's swap seats because you sit here usually, and I'm always loud and noisy. So a little bit closer to the microphone. So hopefully that's better.
Better,
Right, so we've got some questions coming in. So let's have a look at some of these. How to determine if a company is a vehicle or a holding person's assets? Is there a difference? Can I start this one?
Yeah.
So it says a company or a holding vehicle. That's like a husband and wife might not have a trust. They might set up a company to hold an asset.
Right.
It's like a company, but it's a holding vehicle. Its only purpose is really for that asset.
Or to manage that person's funds, right? Buy and sell shares, or put the money in investments, and so like, a wealthy individual might, set up a company to do their share trading.
Right.
They put all their money in, and then that company does that share. So it's holding that person's asset.
Right.
So that's the whole thing about, knowing the nature and purpose of the relationship,
Exactly.
knowing your customer, why are they doing it, who is this person, and making
So
all those checks.
when you first engage with the customer, and I'm conscious, and it's worth pointing out, that a lot of viewers today, not just lawyers and accountants, real estate, we've got lenders, finance companies, fund managers, all sorts logged in today. There's over 100 on this webinar. So the act and legislation, although supervisors might vary, the fundamental act and processes are the same.
They should be the same because that's what Parliament put in. The supervisor. The important thing is like the supervisors cannot change the legislation, right? That's really important, right? Fundamental.
I know I cover it in a slide soon, but one of the issues we see from building a compliance platform that's fit for purpose is that we haven't built it for one type of reporting entity. So we've had to take on board the different workflows.
Right.
And a lawyer's workflow onboarding a customer is very different than an accountant or a real estate. In real estate, they have the frontline people communicating with the customer in the first instance, the vendor. If you're a finance online product, you're not even seeing your customers, and that has a major impact on how you CDD, let alone enhance CDD.
But then you have to see what do a lawyer or accountant or a finance company or all these various sort of reporting entities, what do they have to do? So like under the Act, they've got sort of I think 13 or something type of financial institutions that are there in it, just top of my head. They all have the same obligations. Right? Basically the same obligations, right? There's nothing different under the Act for them all. What do they have to do? They have to know their customer. They have to get their full name, date of birth, address. I would say residential address. That's what the Act says. Full name and date of birth. Registered office, or and then if they have the what's it called? If there's somebody who's acting on behalf of that person, they have to identify them as well, right? So that is fundamental to any business, any reporting entity. You have to know that of the individual. Right? Full name, date of birth. That is what they have to do. Nature and purpose changes from the type of businesses that that are around, like of share brokers. Nature and purpose will be different. Our lawyers will be different, right? That is when they get that thing in. And then what do they have to do? They have to monitor their accounts to make sure what they know about them is what the customer is doing. So that every business has to do that, the same thing. That is in the law, the same thing. There's nothing different for any business to do.
But their workflow and timing is different.
How they do it, because like a lawyer's interaction will be different, right? So they will monitor the interaction in a different way. A finance company, they look at inward payments, they'll see that the payments are as per the contract, and if there's any discrepancy, they will investigate. Right? So just that you're the expert in your business. So you will know how to make sure your customers' activity aligns with what they are doing with you. So it's technically actually business as usual, AML. You have to know your customer. Okay, the Act asks to get a little more information. That is okay, not that much in the Act. Right.
Okay.
And so I mean, this enhanced CDD part is source of the funds and the wealth. So the way I read it is because it says the funds and the wealth. It indicates that Parliament sort of wanted you to talk about the funds that would be used in that relationship.
Right.
Okay. That is the funds and the wealth. So because you're doing it in that particular situation.
All right. So these are my words, viewers. These are certainly not in the code of practice, but this is my interpretation. And there's plenty of interpretations or references to the wealth and the funds. But my view, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the wealth is the accumulated assets of the customer's cash or otherwise, other assets typically, but not always over time. So I might win lotto. My net worth might be $1 million today. But if I win the $22 million lotto tonight and I'm getting a ticket, tomorrow, that makes my few $1 million previous net worth quite academic, because my wealth now is fundamentally that nobody's going to be particularly interested in the 2 million I had before.
Right.
Now the funds is, I think people miss this part of this, is the detail of where the funds are coming from for the transaction. So it's specifically for that transaction, but that includes the movement of the funds.
Yeah. I mean, see, like for funds, right? For layman's terms, funds is money, cash, right?
Yeah.
That's your money. Your wealth would be your shares, would be, some other sort of assets that you have, equity in a property that you're going to be using or for a particular transaction, right? And it depends on the situation. So we'll have to decide situation to situation, what is going to be used in that transaction with your business. And then you decide then, what are you going to do to verify the source of that? See, there's no case law on it, right? So it's quite academic and how you interpret it. So it is source of funds or is the origin of funds? So, what is it? Like, is the source of funds, is it from the bank? Because that's where the money has come from, or where he has earned the money from. So there is again no case law on whether it's the origin or the source of what is the intent here. So then you make your file note and justify what you have done. Yeah. It's all about you justifying what you have done at that particular.
Which means you're really thinking about
what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
In that particular case. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, you're a bit off screen. Scroll back a bit. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Just head into that. It's supposed to be helping me. Okay. Oh, poll time. So we're going to throw up a poll. Oh, you haven't got the questions done? Oh, that's just dandy, isn't it? We'll come back to the poll, folks. Sorry about that. More questions, please, but we want to talk about some scenarios. So it's good if you've got scenarios you want to talk about, discuss, that we cover those, and they'll all be different. So let's just check some questions here. So discussion. This is second, which is oh, some people are having just trouble with our sound there. So, Edith, tell me, what sort of scenarios would you see? What sort of scenarios would you see in terms of where people are struggling? I mean, we're going to get to what documents might use, but in fact, I wanted to sort of do a table, and it wasn't that easy to say, in this scenario, these are the documents you use. But again, there's no one size fits all for any of this.
Right. I'll tell you, I mean, I'm just talking about like when we were implementing tranche 1, when this EDD stuff was being discussed.
Right.
The sort of general understanding was verification would be done, depending on the risk of the situation, meant that if the risk was high, then you would get some documentary evidence about it. If you assess the risk to be low, then you would make a file note about it. And that means you've done some verbal sort of discussion with the person.
So you've diarized it.
Diarize. That would be sort of, for a low risk customer, then you would say this customer is low risk of money laundering from this particular situation. Therefore, we think this is enough.
So this is specific to source of wealth, source of funds?
That's right. This was the thing that we were seeing in tranche 1, right? I mean,
phase one.
Yeah. So the sections haven't changed from phase 1 to phase 2, right? So it hasn't changed. So technically, it's still the same. It should be still the same. I know now supervisors saying there should be some evidence, some documentary evidence, and all that stuff. So I mean, this is not how it was.
So the Act isn't saying this. There's no code of practice saying this.
There's no code of practice.
But it's now being sort of muted that hey, you need to
document something, in that way. So you have to take reasonable steps. So what is reasonable? It is quite unsettling sometimes when this is not clarified by the supervisors. So
Right.
I personally, I think like if the situation is, if you have assessed the situation to be high, right, then you have to get documentary evidence.
Yeah.
It's up to you. You have to get documentary evidence because that is reasonable. Right. It wouldn't be sufficient to say, he told me so and I believed it, right?
Right.
Because you said, it's actually a higher, you have to keep your business safe, right?
Right.
So, what would a normal person think? He's thinking this is a dangerous situation, it's problems for me here, and then I'm going to just take it for face value.
Yeah.
So would a reasonable person think that is okay?
Yeah, there's more, frankly, there's more questions around source of funds. For instance, I was discussing with Malik earlier this morning about, if I come into a marriage and it's an equitable value that the partners have brought in, one has more than the other, and it's a trust, so you have to do ECD on both parties. Thus, you have to do source of wealth, source of funds. It could be different. The difference between the two people, money came from one source from one and another from the source, but they're combining it together. Is it the joint wealth? How far do you go? Because this sounds like it's a
reasonable step, right? Are you satisfied that what they're doing is sort of
So that's a subjective bit.
It is a subjective.
So if I document or diarise and I say that from so I'm getting audited and I say this is my take on this.
Right. So in the audit, it is the audit of your risk assessment and your program, right?
I'm going to make sure that my risk assessment is amended as I carry on.
And your program. So we are auditing your risk assessment and program. So how have you said you will do this thing?
And then are you doing that?
And are you doing that?
So revisiting my risk assessment when I have a different scenario. Because for phase 2 entities, this is, the honeymoon's over, I guess, but it's still early days. And if you start with templates, you've got advice or you've built some of yourself, you must be coming over scenarios all the time where you need to go back to your documentation, treat it as a living document and say, right, now when we have this scenario, we're going to treat this low risk with this trust. Well, it's not technically low risk with the trust, but this is how you're going to perform that ECDD and how you'll do that. What
will you do? That's your procedure, right?
Yeah.
So that section 57(1)J says, you'll have policies, procedures, controls for determining when you use simplified or enhanced CDD. That's right. So it is, again, the wording is like when you will do it, not how you will do it, right? So, so it's sometimes better to combine 57(1)C, J, and K in one, because all these three sections, even though they're spread out in that program section, they all basically talk about customer due diligence.
Right.
Overall, right? That's what it's in that. So here in your program, you will say, this is the steps I will take to verify the source of funds when I'm doing enhanced CDD, and you might have various scenarios. And if you say you will document it, and my reason will be documented, all that it's good to make the program as broad as possible, and give yourself a lot of leeway in that.
Sorry, I see there's a question there on what documents those options, and I've actually got a slide on that, so we'll discuss that.
What documents?
We'll come to that in the next slide, but can we just look at what we've got on this slide? Because some of these questions are relevant on the actual slide, please, Monique. Can you just share that on the screen, please?
It is shared.
Oh, is it? Okay.
The slide is on.
The questions are
so
some of this may not be relevant for everybody, but what about client confidentiality? Well, firstly, when do you do one over the other?
Okay.
When do you do one over the other? When do you do source of wealth as opposed to source of funds?
It depends on what is being used.
Yeah.
Right. If they're going to use,
you need to do one or the other. You don't have to do both.
Or funds, it's all right.
Yeah. So it's one or the other. Whatever sort of matches.
What is being used at that time?
So potentially, probably as a lawyer, I think, what about confidentiality? If the customer shares something with you.
If it goes under privilege, it's under privilege. That's your call at that time. And then no one has the right to ask for it because you claim.
Except if if the source of wealth is from legal activity, which is the purpose of why we're here.
It's, I think there's a question from from Shil about collecting source of funds for the estate. The estate is sort of an interesting construct, isn't it? Because it'll be in the will of that person, right? They will say that is there, and they own all that, and they own all that.
Frankly, I think that's an easy one.
Yeah.
Because you've already got the documents. You've got probate.
Yeah.
That's actually been signed off by a government department.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So that's actually pretty easy.
Yeah, but what
Provided, sorry, if you say when we do estates, our risk assessment says this is how we do it, and our compliance program says this is how we do it.
I think, I mean, if just putting on the sort of devil's advocate here, if you have a criminal enterprise, right, and they know this person is going to die tomorrow, right? They talk to them and say, we're going to give you so much sort of money, gift all that stuff to you.
Right.
And then after you die, you'll have a good life now. After you die, then your estate will put these people as beneficiaries.
Oh, that's a way of money laundering.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Crafty.
It is. It could be done, right?
But
It
then
could be
I
done.
would look at okay, so I would narrow out in my compliance program. We look at and we see if there's any been changes in recent times, perhaps of beneficiaries.
Yeah. So it's a really difficult one because that nature and purpose is to disperse the and then who is the executor? Who's got control of that fund? I mean, with the estate,
Controlling interest.
who's controlling the fund? I mean, thing is again that does the executor of the estate control the funds estate, or is does they have effective control? Do they have effective control?
Yeah.
They don't, because the effective control is the will.
Yeah.
Right. All they're doing is handing out what the will says. But they don't really control it.
Okay.
So the estate it's a really complicated one, still, but you have to
Well,
see.
what we're trying to
it has
not
to
do
be-
is make it
yeah,
complicated.
no, it has to be as reasonable as So you have to see who the person was, what were they doing in their past life. You'll get some idea of what they were, and suddenly if there's disproportionate assets in that estate, and then you can start asking questions about it. And then if you're not sure that you can get all the information to justify it being legitimate, just file an SAR.
Right. Okay.
So if
just
you're not sure.
making sure we do cover the slide questions, the points I put on the slide. So what if we don't cite the customer? So this is a lot of businesses, reporting entities will operate in this way, and they have to do enhanced CDD. Then that's going to be what?
I think that's the last one.
You're talking about the last one there.
Yeah. So see here, okay. I mean, you're free to disagree, but it says it takes reasonable steps. The Act does not say reasonable steps, does not define reasonable steps. So who says what is reasonable, right? And if it's a low risk person, you take reasonable steps. If you look at Section 13 of the Act, which talks about basis. It doesn't talk about source of funds verification, but it talks about the basis of verification of identity. It says there that it says documents, data, or information issued by a reliable independent source. So the Act accepts information. Documents is paper, data is like software, and information. What is information? Verbal stuff, right? So
diarized note, information.
So, I mean, so because the Act is it is supposed to make compliance easy and not difficult. You can make it difficult for yourself if you want to, but because there is no again, there's no case law about what is reasonable. So, what is reasonable? I mean, the supervisors can say, we don't think it is reasonable, but the court might chuck that out.
Yeah.
The court might not agree with you, so it is, and it's really, documenting it properly and your reasons why you think it is okay. It's up to you, You might say that for me only a document is a reasonable step. And
it's got to be workable.
It should be workable, Mainly, the whole thing is you're in this to do business, right? You're not in this to catch criminals, mainly, So you just try to make it easy for your customers, access to financial services, access to legal services, access to accounting services should not be sort of made difficult because of legislation.
Yeah, it shouldn't be forgotten that, when you make your inquiry into source of wealth, source of fund, it isn't a tick box exercise, and sending off just blanket questions to customers is not a good experience for the customer. So again, that's why I sort of hark back to when do you need to do it? You've got to make sure you're doing it at the right time and not just sort of blanketing across customers where perhaps you don't need to. Just before we get on questions, I'm just going to be finicky about this, but this last one here, what if the customer does not provide proof? This one here, it's on the green slide.
Was it?
What if the customer does not provide proof?
Then if you can't do CDD, then this enhanced CDD is part of doing CDD. If you can't do CDD, then you cannot establish the relationship with the customer.
Right.
It's simple as that.
So it's good to say maybe in your engagement documents that you're not a customer until such time as we have this stuff completed. Yeah. Okay. Nick, you want to just manage those questions a bit? I can't see the whole slide there, unfortunately, the questions up.
There's a lot of questions and we won't be able to get through them.
There's an interesting one that opinion establish an objective test rather than a subjective test for reasonable ground to suspect a suspicious transaction. It is dangerous. Reasonable grounds, but like in the Shendodo case, the DIA had 174 instances where they were going to file suspicious transaction, but because DIA could not prove that any of those transactions were actually linked to criminal activity, they withdrew those. They withdrew those information. They did not file them. So again, like if it's reasonable that the whole thing is like it's an objective test. So like I think in this one is they were doing say $10,000 transaction. Suddenly they're doing 500,000. That is definitely something is not quite right in that case there.
Yeah.
So then you have to do that stuff. So again, it's like who's the person, what are the situation, what have they done before, how much difference from what they've done before.
So these aren't necessary transactions.
These are suspicious. So is it suspicious?
It's a behavior change.
Is it behavior change? Is it suspicious? And again, if you have documented and you say, I don't think it's a problem because of so and so reason, this is the information I've got.
Right. Okay. Nick, can you read a question out for us so everybody can hear?
Is the source of funds necessary for all trusts, even for a low-risk basic family trust?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yep, that's on the earlier slide. Oh, it's definitely trusts.
Each time a trust invests, is source of funds required again?
It is not per transaction. It is because it's when you establish the business relationship. So like
that's part of that's part of the CD. That's part of the onboarding the customer.
That's right.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Now, what I would say correctly that if that customer associated with the risk level I've already put them against, say that I've got to review them in 6 months.
Ongoing CDD comes in.
Ongoing CDD.
That is when ongoing CDD kicks in. When they're putting in more money again, then you have to see that what have they told you about it. It does align with the new money.
There's two things going on here. There's two things going on. I've done my enhanced CDD, and they continue to do further investments, and I don't have to do source of funds on every investment until such time as my monitoring requires a review.
That's right. And depending on the risk of the situation.
Or the risk changes.
Or the risk of
which is the pattern of behavior changes.
That's right. It's all about the risk of that situation. Yeah. So you have to assess the risk of that situation.
Again, the nub of the whole point of the legislation.
The risk of that situation. It is like, they have told you X, Y, Z, and they're doing A, B, C, D, or whatever. And it doesn't align with what they have told you what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
It is unusual in the context of that customer. That's the whole opinion thing. It was unusual in the context of that customer. So if it was unusual, it had to be investigated. You had to determine whether it was going to be a, the SAR or not an SAR. So these guys didn't do anything like that. So again, if it is unusual, you have to investigate it. You have to make written findings. It says written finding, right? That's your notes.
Okay, Monica, we've got another question.
For a low-risk family trust, can we rely on a balance sheet prepared by an accountant as evidence of source of wealth?
I mean, I've come across information that supervisors said, like, statement of accounts from your accountant is evidence of source of funds, especially if they're filing for IRDC. Remember, I mean, if the accountant says something and they put their pen to it, if they're making a fraudulent sort of document, it's their responsibility to do that, right? And in the normal course of business, you're entitled to trust people to be honest with you.
You'd want the signed documents.
That's right. You'd want it because if they're putting, making some false information, making a fake document, then that's fraud, right? And then you are the victim of fraud.
Yeah.
So, and then you can put that in the program, the documents that we will accept to as evidence of source of funds.
So important.
So, I mean,
to identify what documents you choose to
pay slips, or, you can statement of accounts, the tax returns, and anything that shows you that this is where they get their money from.
This reminds me that you talked to me before about PEP checks and
Right.
the differences there. Can you explain that?
For the politically exposed person checks, right? 26 says source of funds, source of wealth of the PEP. That means everything that they own, right? And it's high risk.
Right.
So that it becomes a really difficult sort of,
Yeah.
for
So
the
fortunately not.
reporting entity.
So if you do PEPs, through vigilance, it's click of a button, and
You know
most of
they're
the time
a
you're going to, and you'll be told pretty quickly, well,
They're
you
a
can
PEP.
tell in seconds whether you've got a PEP or not. So that's a problem when it comes to PEP.
So with the PEPs, it says after you establish a business relationship, you take steps to establish that they're a PEP or not, right? So you
Right.
don't have to do the step check before you.
Yeah.
So it's in reasonable time.
So just clarification there, the PEP check is post
Establishing.
establishing a relationship, but the CDD or ECD is
Before.
not. That's at the time.
The moment you say they're a PEP, and you might pick them up as a PEP, when you do your ongoing CDD. Some companies they check their entire database through
Right.
Reuters or some of these big firms, and then because the operating word for that PEP is preceding 12 months, right?
Okay.
With the preceding 12
So
months.
very recent documentation.
So the preceding 12 months. So I've known firms to do this PEP screening.
Yeah.
It's expensive exercise, but
Yeah.
they do it every year with annual check every year
Yeah.
to
Okay.
determine if they're
No,
PEP
the
or not.
previous one, sorry to interrupt. This is important. This is my sort of angst on the whole source of funds. Proof of documents, and there's plenty of the discussion here about documents you can use. There are a lot of documents. It's easy for some than others, and that's a bit of what this slide's about, really. Different reporting entities have access to different information, like the estate question before, and banks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole thing started with Trans One and banks and so on. Workflow is different. They have access to bank information. They can see somebody's bank transactions. Accountants can see the company accounts if it's an existing customer, not so if a new customer, and bank statements. Lawyers get to see trust documents, wills, contracts, titles, and so on. Real estate agents, they get a lot less. They just get maybe you can ask for vendor property ownership documents, maybe mortgages, but they've got to request that information. Financial lenders can get credit information, but that in itself is not enough.
For financial, I'll tell you for the first one, banks have access to bank accounts, right? But you might have accounts in 10 banks.
Yeah.
You might, the one bank might not have access to information of the source of fund. That's a little issue there, right? Accountants, generally you'd have account, you'd be preparing a statement of accounts, so you would know that because an accountant's statement of accounts is accepted as source of fund, right?
Yeah.
So you'd expect an accountant to know the accounts of it, and reasonably, right? Reasonably, you might have various shell company identities or whatever, and
Right.
that's a different issue, right?
Okay.
But for most normal people, you would expect the accountant to have that, right?
Right.
Lawyers, access to trust documents, wills, contracts. They would have access to that. I mean, with lawyers who form the trust, they would know, right?
Or they're going to pick up existing trust as new business.
Real estate, access to the vendor's property. With real estate guys, I mean, if you're selling someone's house, then you have to make sure that the person has the right to sell the house. So, you're going to make sure that you're going to do your check,
Right.
CDD checks.
So there's some obvious documentation.
Yeah, the obvious documentation there. You're going to, do a valuation of the property. So you're not going to get the information about the wealth that is going to be used in that sale.
And remember,
Financial lenders is an interesting thing. Because this consumer lenders, right? They are sort of covered under that Credit Consumer Finance Act, right? And so they have to make sure that the funds that are going to be used in the repayment will not cause them undue hardship to that customer. So for most financial lenders, I'd think that they would have to do enhanced CDD on their customers because they would have to make sure that they've got access to funds to make those repayments without undue financial hardship, right?
Yep.
So they would have to do that. They'd have to document it. Otherwise, the Commerce Commission will be really upset about it. So there's a couple of legislations that that would fit in here. So it would be good for them to put that in the program.
Sure. Okay. So we're running out of time. I do apologise for the bit of the stuff up at the beginning, and we're quite happy to just run a little bit longer. But Again, ultimately you need to satisfy yourself that the source of wealth, source of funds didn't come from ill-gotten gains. And it's important to sort of come back on point. This is what this is all about, your risk assessment, the documentation, evidence.
Reasonable.
Reasonable, yeah.
That's
Reasonable, and from a
in the
time
risk of the
perspective as well.
Reasonable in the risk of that situation.
Yeah.
What you think is it should would a normal person think that is okay. That's the test of reasonableness, isn't it? So and remember, you're a financial institution. You're not a detective or anything like that. You are going to be you are entitled to trust your customer under normal circumstances to tell you the truth, right? So otherwise, if they're telling a lie, then there's all fraud. The whole Crimes Act is there for people who are behaving dishonestly.
All right.
So
okay, so we're just about out of time, folks.
There's a lot of questions.
There
We
are-
might
Right,
have to-
yeah,
we might have
keep
to get the
skipping.
answers to these
Yeah.
and email them out.
Yep. So we will look at these questions offline. We certainly encourage, and there's a link to the forum where you can post these questions as well.
I mean, let's talk to the first one. That's quite important. What like
So-
a sale and purchase agreement is technically is not evidence of source of funds of that they got money from the sale of the property, because sale and purchase
It's just a
agreement
document of an event.
agreement to sell, it doesn't show that the sale is actually
Oh,
gone
I
through.
see. Yep.
And like say, for example, the sale of purchase of property is for say, a couple of $1 million, right? But the property has got $1 million mortgage on it. So, this,
Right. Good point. Yeah.
so but then the net value is only so much. And the
Yeah.
real estate agent may have taken a big chunk out of it.
Right.
The lawyer might have taken a chunk. So what is the net income? That would
Yeah.
be the money that comes from the lawyer's trust
Okay.
account.
So
the
to
other
the previous slide, as the vendor the sales of a property
Mhm.
isn't evidence of wealth. It's just we had this, but we repaid a mortgage with it, so our net value is zero. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, just to sort of cap it all, best case scenario, always get a document, right? It'll be good to get some document, for any type when you do enhanced CD. That is sort of, the safest way to do it, to get a document.
Well, that's relevant, and that's the point here.
That is the safest way. I mean, I'd recommend if you are going to do enhanced CD, I'd say, because see, thing is like you don't want to get into an argument with the supervisor, right? So, so they want you to get some sort of a document.
Yeah.
So try to get a document as much as you can, right? Pay slips or,
Right. So,
any sort of income sort of showing that you've just
so just in summary,
Right.
your documentation which supports your thinking and how you went about it. If you get, given the DIA turn up on your doorstep and say, prove this, it's got to be relevant and consistent with your risk and compliance program. So there's a living processes you need to continue to enhance and improve. Enhance, there's a bit of a pun there, but it's also got to be, it can't be a tick box thing. You have to have one document might be okay for one event, one transaction or business activity, but it may not be suitable for another. So you really need to demonstrate that on each occasion.
And that's where the risk assessments are really important, Sam, because it talks about the types of customers you deal with, right? So what is your target market? So if the types of customers you deal with are going to be like, people who have got cash intensive businesses, and it's a well-known fact that cash intensive businesses are tax evasion, right?
Yeah.
For tax evasion is a really big predicate offense in New Zealand for money laundering, right?
Right.
So if you've got customers who are owners of cash intensive businesses, then you've identified them as a risk customer. So when you do your risk assessment, what is the risk assessment that section 58.2 has to come down to 58.3, that what are the risks that you have identified?
Right.
So you have identified the risks for my customers is that they could do so and so. The products that I have are so and so. So then if you identify the type of customers you deal with are a high risk sort of type of customer,
Right.
then that means when you do enhanced CDD, you've already identified them as a high risk customer. Then you have to get some document about them, right? So that is how these documents sort of work in tandem. Right?
Do we want to slip one more question in here, Monique? There's so many to choose from, which is
Yeah,
great.
this-
It just highlights that this is a contentious.
25 questions altogether.
Yeah, I think we're not going to do this justice at this time, and
And people need to leave.
Yeah.
So-
So we're gonna wrap up now. So you know, compliance. If it's not written down, then it didn't happen. Show me, don't tell me. Keep those things in mind because that's in essence what we've been talking about here, whether it's standard CDD, enhanced CDD. Certainly if you need to discuss any of this further, you'd like to know more about either vigilance or the services that UDEF provides in auditing and consulting, give us a call or email us. You've got our contact details and we're happy to follow up with you. Thank you very much, and I hope it's been informative. It's a big topic, and obviously we could talk on for some time. May even do a revisit of this.
I mean, enhanced CDD is the biggest pain in this whole regime, right?
Yeah.
It's been a pain for a long time.
Well, I think ultimate beneficial ownership as well, which is
It is a that badly written section.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
You know,
So happy days.
yeah.
AML.
But it's good to have a discussion like this because you know,
Well, we need them. We need these discussions, and that's why we're doing this. So thanks everybody,
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
and cheerio. And we'll see you next time.